happens to a China-made vehicle, Haval, in this particular case, after 15 years of ownership and 140,000 kilometers on the clock in relatively harsh weather conditions, but not unattended to service-wise? Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Dimitri, this is Value Cars Australia, and who doesn't like a little bit of controversy? This is definitely not a clickbait video. It attracted my attention on Klubniy Servis's YouTube channel. This is why I'm bringing it to your attention, to promote their video. So Ilya will be talking to us what happened to the car over time. Spoiler alert, it rusted. He will just show us exactly where, what didn't rust so much, etc, etc. So it will be interesting for you. Let's be very, very clear. He's, well, conveniently skipping one very obvious fact. This car is 15 years old, and of course, for 15 years, the car manufacturing industry has evolved. So, of course, the Chinese vehicles that we are buying right now are presumably is the keyword, of higher quality, especially the bodies of those. They are made of more rust-protective materials and stuff like this. So before you rage there and go into the comments to tell me about it, please understand that I'm not oblivious to that fact. However, a lot of what he will show will be very, very insightful. And please do not try and tell me that every little bit of a China-made vehicle these days is completely rust-proof, because we know for a fact that it's not. This is not the first review of China-made vehicles versus Japanese vehicles and others that Ilya, for example, is making. Anyway, enough of a rant. I just wanted to stop the immediate kind of controversial, let me not watch the video and immediately type up an angry comment below, because I don't want to ban you. I want you to remain a part of my club, but I don't want this video or my translation of it to be misunderstood. This is, as always, awareness building videos when you're buying potentially a cheaper vehicle from a manufacturer where we do not know exactly what kind of steel, what kind of elements of other engineering, automotive engineering are being used in different parts of it. So watch it, let me know afterwards. Once you have watched the whole video, absolutely tell me how you feel about it in the comments down below. I welcome your opinions. So this car was made in 2010. Ilya can't recall the exact manufacturing year, but this has 140,000 kilometers on the clock, which is fair for an average use of about 10,000 per year, I suppose. It was bought brand new from a dealership and had a single owner who took reasonable care of it over all these years. No, it's not this Land Cruiser 200 and not this Suzuki. We talked about it in another video. It's GWM Haval H5 that has basically been branded back then as Haval Hava on the territory of Russia. This is not very important, as we all know that brands relabel vehicles for local markets. All we're interested in today is what was it made of back then and how well did it last. Main part of this conversation will revolve around the body of the vehicle and the amount of corrosion that we can find. As mentioned earlier, we can see it sadly everywhere. Starting with the tailgate, and even without zooming in, we can see spots of rust around the number plate, any screws and bolts, any holes really. And on the inside, Ilya even uses here a screwdriver to show us that the metal kind of falls apart into these sheets of whatever it's made of, or at least used to be made of back then. And these sheets are slowly coming apart like a rather unpleasant looking layered cake. Rear wheel arch and the panel above, same story. Doors, we take a look at them, same layered cake, rusted through, which is rather sad to see. Ilya here focuses on the fuel tank cover, which according to him typically, even on the old vehicles, is preserved usually as brand new, even on the very old cars, but as we can see, not here. It looks seriously like the car was submerged in the water up to a certain water line, doesn't it? But let's keep going. Front left door, spots of rust here, here and here, he's pointing out, pretty much everywhere. Okay, maybe the wheel arches are good then. Well, nope, sadly nope. Rust everywhere where it's not plastic. Where plastic begins, obviously it conceals the actual damage to the metal underneath. Ilya makes repeated points here on the spots of corrosion on the other side of the vehicle, so that some viewer wouldn't tell him that on the left-hand side maybe the car was hit and then repaired and repainted, hence more susceptible to rust. At least that's what they believe. But no, it's not been damaged, this car, and on the same, it's the same picture on the other side.
Strangely enough, and of no real consequence, the rust is not spotted on the roof and none of the bonnet on the bonnet of the vehicle. This Haval is a vehicle on a frame, and Ilya says that in there, where the conditions kind of very severely exposed to the elements during winter and stuff like that, a frame of a 15-year-old vehicle is more or less looking the same, whether it's a China-made car or whether it's a Japanese-made car, such as a Land Cruiser 200. It's usually quite average, you know, can be summarized as average the condition, with plenty of rust in various spots. And obviously the body of this vehicle rusts more where it connects and joins with the frame, where it sits on the elements of the frame. That's how rust sort of penetrates through. Ilya shows a rusty frame fittings, arms, bolts. If you, if you kind of pay attention, you can see it all with your own eyes. I don't need to point all of that out to you. Now, the credit where it's due part. Ilya says that this car, regardless of its rusted through condition, was self-propelling, self-moving and driving until the very last moment before this video was filmed. Continuing to look at the vehicle's suspension and rear axle specifically, we can see completely rusted through support arms that Ilya says any mechanic, who would take a closer look at this, they would safely say it's not repairable and you can't lift it, you would have to replace it entirely. Take a look at the brand new brake pads apparently, and just break some elements of the brake system, proof that the owner of the vehicle tried to do the right thing, replacing these elements when advised by the dealer. But once you leave the car in the hands of any dealer over there or here in Australia, you are at their mercy, really. You are at the mercy of the dealership-based service center and how they treat the warranty as well. You don't see and kind of don't control what they pay particular attention to, versus decide to leave it alone under too much trouble clause, let's call it. Here, Ilya basically scratches off some rust, the parts of the braking system that are falling into this rusty kind of mush in his fingers into. So it's really, really grim. Ilya moves on to the suspension spring coils, and you guessed it, they're basically rusted through and non-existent, as he says. He also says that this car is definitely better than Range Rover, as he tries to wobble the main driving shaft and says that it basically wobbles less than he would expect a similar detail kind of to wobble on the products from Land Rover brand. I guess we can treat it as good news, if you will. Moving on, he comments here on something leaking from the exhaust system, where it certainly is not supposed to be leaking. I mean, none of it should be leaking, nowhere, but we're sort of a bit more used to the oil leaks from kind of where the driving shafts are connecting to the transfer cases and that kind of stuff, and he shows that to us plentifully here as well in this not particularly structured kind of review. He's just walking around and commenting on what he sees, and so do we. But this greenish liquid should not leak from the exhaust system, while it does. Speaking of what else is wrong with the car, because the rust is pretty obvious, and what the owner was concerned about, it was that slightly greenish leaking liquid, and kind of you can see it coming from all the seams and connections of the driving shaft, as I already mentioned, and a little bit more from the exhaust pipe. Ilya already acknowledged that some parts have clearly been replaced with the new ones, as they stand out as a very, very stark contrast next to completely brown and rusty surfaces that are basically no longer living elements of the whole drivetrain. Exciting experiment coming up. Ilya tells us that the 4th cylinder spark plug, it was actually missing, leaving a hole basically in the engine. Yeah, it happens in vehicles of that kind of age, right? And they are going to start the engine very, very briefly, and shows us what it looks like when a less diligent or discerning owner ignores such a prominent symptom and, let's call it, pushes through the pain and keeps driving like this. Wow, we all just saw what happened. Needless to say, not advisable. Do not repeat it at home, kids. Ilya says that this was antifreeze liquid, actually, partly evaporated and spat out by the engine through the well of the missing spark plugs, through that hole in the engine, telling us that, who knows exactly what needs to happen to that engine, but it basically needs to be either properly refurbished, if not replaced fully. In summary, Ilya quotes one of the old, you can raise your eyebrows at this, but this is a bit of a traditional kind of insight into a cultural Russian proverbs. If you want to know what your fiancé would look like in the old age, you need to take a closer look at their parent. Paraphrasing here a little bit, not to trigger some particularly sensitive folks out there. Chill, people. The point here is that a lot of us are buying brand new Chinese vehicles from these brands, including GWM, MG, Cherry, all of that kind of stuff, looking at the shine and bling and accessible electronic systems that they basically sell us these cars with. Because all those extras, they would be out of reach in the price category where we can kind of get our hands on them when we're buying Chinese versus, say, Korean or Japanese mainstream car brands. But this is what we see as an example of what a relatively well actually maintained China-made car might turn into in the old age.
And there you go. Oh my god, scary, right? But as I said, of course, this is possibly not as well rust protected. But possibly is the key word, because no one guarantees anything these days. All we know is that these vehicles coming out of China are certainly cheaper. And when something is cheaper, that usually is not free. It's not because Santa visited. You know what I mean? Cheaper means something, some corners were cut, something was a bit different to what we expect from more mainstream brands, such as Japanese ones. But again, another thing, in case you missed it and fast-forwarded, whatever, that I'd like to emphasize. Anything rusts. Japanese vehicles rust, especially in the harsher weather conditions, where are the winters, rain, other kind of stuff, harsher conditions. It doesn't have to be Russian winters. It can be, United Arab Emirates harsh summers with sand getting everywhere, and God knows what kind of damage that does. We're not even going there. So regardless, I hope that you've enjoyed at least some of this. If you did, and you are one of those respectfully mutes who never talk to me, but at least give me a like. At least you have like one finger operational, like press the like button right now so that I know that this landed with you well. Or leave a comment down below. Just be mutually respectful and respectful to me, because please, no warning shots around here. My patience is like about this thin for trolls. Thanks again for being with me today. I hope you have a nice, good mood like I am at the moment of recording, pre-recording the intro and outro of this video, and good on you if you know what this is. And I'll talk to you next week about something else, value cars related in Australia, anywhere else in the world. Goodbye for now.